Welcome back. All right, I haven't talked about wrestling in a while. I'm aware of that. I'm also aware that the video I did on my ongoing disappointment with AEW is the most popular video on this channel all year, which tells me that there's a lot of people who agree. And there's also going to be some AEW fans who are going to come in and say, nope, you just don't understand the business. You're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And all right, so here we are. So AEW's ratings for Dynamite are down 23% from where they were last year. And last year they were off about 10% from where they were the year before. AEW has had a problem with drawing ratings. Now, comparing them to WWE isn't quite fair, as WWE has carried on networks seemingly with more reach, at the very least better ratings. Raw's ratings are steady from year to year, and SmackDown's are down slightly in August of this year from last year, keeping in mind that you have the Democratic National Convention, which seemed to have affected ratings all over TV this past week, and then you had the Olympics before that too. So the reality is that WWE's interest right now, it's been high. Crowd's been pretty hot at WWE events. And it was like, what, 5 years ago that everything WWE was booking didn't make a lot of sense. I still have issues with some of the booking in WWE, but the overall storylines are just excellent. So I'm going to go through each match or in-ring segment. I don't include backstage segments because otherwise this board would be completely filled by Raw. Raw has at least in my opinion, way too many backstage segments, way too many of these things. I think there should be more of the story told through the wrestling in the ring. AEW does try to do that. So starting off Dynamite this week, Mercedes Moné and Britt Baker's contract signing. And I'm wearing my Britt Baker t-shirt because I do get accused of, he's clearly just a WWE fan. He hates AEW. No, I have a number of AEW shirts that I acquired years ago when I was huge. I thought it was great. I was a huge fan of the product, and it's just not what it was to me. And this feud, for whatever reason, it's not quite clicking for me. Maybe it's because Britt's just returned and suddenly she's against Mercedes. I kind of feel like there should be more of a build than what we've seen. I don't think it's going to be a one and done kind of thing. I don't think they'll just have this one match and be finished. However, it is AEW. AEW's built up big feuds before and then had the blow off match at that one pay-per-view, and then you move on to the next feud, which is fine from a wrestling perspective, sure, but I think the long-term storylines in WWE, we'll talk about that. But Mercedes and Britt, it's just not quite clicking as well for me as I had hoped. Jericho defeats Tommy Dynamite Kid Billington. This is the Dynamite Kid's nephew. Fun to see him in a match, but Chris Jericho, at this point, I don't know, the whole learning tree thing just it's not clicking for me either. Jericho, I know he gets mad. Well, he doesn't get mad, but he'll answer back to the please retire chants, because that's what you get when you're an older wrestler. But I just feel like everything's kind of run its course for him in AEW. Like, I was very much a fan of Chris Jericho's initially in AEW, and I thought it would make a lot of sense for him to be champion early on there to get more eyeballs on the product. But right now, I just don't know. I don't know that the learning tree thing's really going much of anywhere. So you guys can let me know your thoughts on that. Toni Storm defeated Saraya in what might have been one of the worst women's wrestling matches we've seen in years. Their timing was off. They had an off night, but rough time to have an off night because All In's coming Sunday from Wembley. And it didn't make a lot of sense either to say, all right, so Saraya, we'll give you a title shot. Oh, okay. So we know Storm's not losing the title going into the pay-per-view, so... And then Mariah comes out and attacks Storm after. And what I thought was interesting was Mariah May, the initial attack when she turned heel is this brutal, like, awful, bloody mess for Toni. And this attack was just kind of friendly by comparison. I was like, yeah, maybe she's not that mad anymore. I will say Mariah May is extremely talented both on the mic and in the ring. She's young. The future is extremely bright. So in the WWE side, you've got Tiffany Stratton. Also honorable mention to Roxanne Perez. There's the debate about whether or not Roxanne's ready. That's been a blowing up online. I'll say she is. Like, I've watched a lot of her stuff in NXT, and if you're going to say, well, she's not that great on the mic, there's lots of wrestlers that aren't great on the mic. So I will say I think she's ready. Anyways, That being said, there's also some speculation Saraya, her contract's coming up in AEW. Maybe she's going to go back to WWE. She's going to have to improve her ring work though if she's going to go back to WWE. We then had a confrontation between Ospreay and MJF, and this is definitely hitting. I don't know if Ospreay or MJF are going to win this match. I think that MJF is the ultimate heel. Not that I'd boo him if I went and saw an AEW show live, and when I had an opportunity to go and see an AEW show live, I didn't go because the tickets were really expensive considering it, like they were more expensive than WWE tickets. So I don't know what to tell you. Maybe it's just in Vancouver. Maybe that's not the case everywhere. But when you're looking at the attendance in AEW being down for live events, that might be part of it. It might be pricing too. But the Ospreay MJF feud, that's absolutely working. Then you have Okada versus Claudio. That match ends up being a draw. I did watch the ups and downs from Simon Miller. I will agree with him that calling out the time during the match makes a lot of sense because otherwise it just becomes a draw kind of out of nowhere. I used to enjoy watching NWA, which became WCW, because they would do that. You'd have every match was a 20-minute match, and you'd hear 10 minutes gone in the match, 10 minutes, and then 5 minutes left in this match, 5 minutes. And it added to this sense of something could happen now. This idea that, okay, they're running out of time, and the wrestlers in the ring, when they would hear these prompts, would wrestle a little bit different. There was more of a sense of urgency as you'd hear that 5 minutes left. So, yeah, I don't know why AEW doesn't do that, since they do have draws, which is fine. In certain instances, it's fine. In fact, I would rather have a draw than a no contest. No contest kind of ticked me off, especially if it's over 10 minutes, and then there's just a bunch of, run-ins and schmozzes, and you're like, all right, so that 10 minutes was for nothing. But I don't know. I don't know how well the Blackpool Combat Club is just clicking in general right now. And there are so many stables in AEW. I've talked about how I think there's probably a few too many, although there might be one too many in WWE as well. We'll talk about that in a minute. FTR and Darby Allin defeat the Elite. There's, of course, speculation that Darby Allin could at some point soon become the champion in AEW. This is where you can get into that debate. So Darby Allin is a hard worker, very good wrestler, but he's also very small. He's also very small by wrestling standards. And while you can have a small champion, Rey Mysterio is one that comes to mind. It's rare. And it's rare in wrestling for reasons that we can have that debate about. Obviously, Vince McMahon was not a fan of smaller wrestlers. So if you were under a certain weight, you were either in the cruiserweight division while they had it, or you were mid-card, maybe enhancement talent. And so that's one of those frustrating things, and I understand why that's frustrating. I just don't know that Darby Allin as champion would necessarily click with the crowd all that well. And again, for the NWA, for the AEW fans who are like, they love it every single week and they're into it and they love the product, they're going to buy it. But those are the fans that are already buying it. And those are not the fans that AEW should be trying to appeal to. They should be trying to appeal to people who are not watching the product. Would Darby Allin winning the title win back fans that have tuned out over the last couple of years? I think that's a valid question. So you guys can let me know your thoughts. Would Darby Allin winning the title, if you don't watch AEW, would that make you go back and watch it again? And then they had the confrontation between Danielson and Swerve. So you have a contract signing and 2 confrontations. So not a lot of actual wrestling matches, which is something that I've noticed with AEW over the last little while, that they've started to make it a more WWE feel to the show. And then when you combine that with the fact there's a lot of former WWE talents in the company, I understand why some people look at it and go, well, it's WWE light. Well, it's the ex-WWE guys, and it feels like it wants to be Raw. And I don't think that's conducive to ratings boost for the company at all. As much as I like the wrestlers are picking up, like picking up Ricochet, good call. Absolutely good call. He fits in, but is it going to change the nature of some of these matches? Is it going to draw more eyeballs to the product? I don't know. I know when I went to the WWE event in Vancouver, Drew McIntyre put over Ricochet. Like, they had a match. McIntyre won, and then he called Ricochet back into the ring and basically said, this is a fantastic wrestler, great guy. There's no reason he's not, like, champion. He should be like top of the card kind of thing. He was very complimentary of Ricochet. So apparently he's popular, at least with Drew, and I would think with others too, to be able to have that time in the ring and to get that kind of a boost from a guy that clearly WWE loves in McIntyre. So we'll see how Ricochet does in AEW. I hope he's presented not just as the high flyer, but hopefully as a good wrestler and all that fun stuff. But yeah, so that's how Dynamite went this week, right? That's your build up for All In. You have all these confrontations, so All In's on Sunday. We know they're going to make a lot of money from Wembley. That's why the show gets built up as much as it does. And then All Out follows pretty much immediately, right? You get All In out of the way and then All Out, which is the one criticism that I would have is that I think there should be more time between the two. Make it so that like All In has these huge stakes and really big potential moves, because I don't like the idea that it kind of just sets up All Out. But anyways, you guys can discuss. So Raw this past week, and I'm just going to talk about Raw, not SmackDown. So August 19th, it starts off with Orton confronting Gunther. Good storyline here by the WWE. Orton wasn't properly pinned in the King of the Ring match against Gunther, so WWE leans into it, and it's created a pretty interesting little feud here. I think Gunther clearly will get the win over Orton. Orton is still a main event guy, but the title doesn't seem to be something that he's overly concerned with, and he doesn't need it. Randy Orton does not need the belt. He gets huge pops again. I was there. I witnessed one. Might have got the loudest cheers of the night in Vancouver because he's Randy Orton. Does not need the belt at all. And I think he's having more fun right now, at least it looks like he is, than he has been in ages. I think he's just really enjoying his role. Sheamus defeats Pete Dunne. I'm mildly surprised by this, but it feels like Dunne, who's now down in NXT for, matches here and there, I feel like Dunne's not necessarily being repackaged, but I think they're going to make a little bit of a change in how he's presented on TV. I think they'll get him away from Sheamus. I think he'll end up on the other brand, that kind of thing. But I'm not sure what they're doing with Sheamus either, so we'll see, because we know Ridge Holland is down in NXT as well. He's down with Chase U, and I have to say, I think that one works well, but that's NXT. Then we had Maxine Dupree versus Ivy Nile. We know this wasn't going to end up being finished, and it wasn't. It's no contest due to the Wyatt Six getting involved. As much as I love the Wyatt Six being involved, I'm not sure why they get involved when they did in this match. I thought they'd get involved after the match was done. The trick then becomes, so does WWE do this so that Maxine doesn't lose the match, so that Ivy doesn't lose the match? Maxine Dupree is trying. The effort is there. She has the look. I think the effort is definitely something that she's shown. But Ivy Nile is a fantastic talent. She's very small. The one thing with Ivy Nile is she's tiny, but as we've seen with Alexa Bliss, it can work in the women's division. It feels like it's a little bit easier for a smaller women's wrestler to be taken seriously as like that main event draw rather than on the men's side. AJ Lee comes to mind as one that was smaller, but she was still like main event and fantastic. And she's one that Roxanne Perez gets a lot of comparisons with as well. Punk confronts McIntyre. This feud is hopefully almost done. I'm hoping that it's done. August 31st, you have Bash in Berlin. Get it finished, get it over with, and just move on. Punk very likely gets the win over McIntyre. Then you could take McIntyre, and I think the perfect spot for him is in Judgment Day as their big enforcer, like their physical backup. One thing I think Judgment Day could use is a big wrestler that they kind of hide behind. Because usually with smaller wrestlers, and again, I'm only comparing it to other professional wrestlers, these are not small guys, but when you're going after Priest, I think having somebody like McIntyre as backup, and McIntyre and Priest have a history, I think it can work. New Day with Odyssey Jones, they defeat the Final Testament. Final Testament, I don't know. It doesn't seem to click. I think for the Final Testament, their gimmick is not that far off from what Judgment Day was at the start. And while I really like the Authors of Pain, I think they are legitimately terrifying individuals. And I like the group, the aesthetic, the way they look. Again, when I was at SmackDown, that's where the group formed. And I was like, okay, cool. So they're back. But it doesn't feel like it's clicking. And I think the Final Testament's probably almost done. It just feels like it is because they lose every feud it seems that they're in. Obviously, the Odyssey Jones being a part of with New Day is to break up Kofi and Xavier, and I'm okay with that. To be honest, it does feel like New Day they've had their time, they've had their run. Kofi with Odyssey Jones as a tag team could absolutely work. It's a shame Kofi never got another run with a title at some point as a singles wrestler. But Xavier Woods never really has either, so maybe this is an opportunity for him if he turns heel, right? So, and it definitely feels like he's the one that's going to turn. Bronson Reed defeated The Miz. So Bronson Reed, the monster push he's getting, we've seen WWE do this many times before, where the physically bigger wrestler will just like decimate whoever he's against. Big Show. Every time Big Show turned heel, he would have the following Raw or SmackDown. He'd destroy like 4 or 5 different guys, and it was just get him over as a monster. For Reed, it's a little different, a little more subtle. He takes out Seth, so Seth gets a little bit of a break. He's been banged up with injuries and all. And then he'll come back and have his confrontation with Reed. I would think that's probably a SummerSlam match, right? So they're building up Reed, and good, because it's felt like since he hit the main roster, he's been there, he's been in matches, but he hasn't really felt like much of a threat. Now he feels more like a threat. The Judgment Day attacks the Terror Twins, which is, of course, Damian Priest and Rhea Ripley. They had to have this because it just felt like Priest and Ripley could just run roughshod over the whole group. You can't have that. So Judgment Day getting that attack and Rhea looking human against Liv Morgan is important, because I still can't get over that visual when Rhea's on one side, Liv's on the other. I'm thinking, if this was an actual fight, it lasts 20 seconds. Like, Rhea's not, she's not going to get stopped by Liv. I think Liv's a good wrestler, but there's no chance. The Unholy Union, which is an interesting tag team name for Alba Fire and Isla Dawn, but they retained the titles against Damage Control and Pure Fusion Collective. I can't say it's the worst name in the history of wrestling for any kind of faction, but it feels like it's up there. It really feels like it's up there. When I heard that, I was like, what? Like, these are 3 women that you believe when you're watching wrestling could legitimately beat everybody up. That if they decide, you know what, we're going into business for ourselves, who's going to stop them? And in this battle with Damage Control, one thing that stands out to me is just how much bigger the ladies are in this Pure Fusion Collective. I'd like to see Zoe get a run with the title, or Sonya get a run with the title, or hey, Shayna Baszler. Shayna Baszler clearly is willing to get pinned. She's willing to put other women over, and I think it's hurt. It's hurt what was a great push for her in NXT. She's never really had that on the main level or main roster level. And so I'm not sure where this is going other than Damage Control against the Pure Fusion Collective. It's a terrible name. It's awful. PFC, it still doesn't work. It doesn't. And WWE's had some rough names for factions, for women's factions in WWE before. I remember when they paired off all these women in these factions, and it wasn't great. So I do like that Isla Dawn and Alba Fire kept the titles here. I think that if they continue to build them up and keep the belts on somebody for a while, because those women's tag belts have not always been treated like they're important or treated like anybody can hold on to them for more than a week. So, yeah, we'll see where this all ends up, but I'm looking forward to Io Sky against Shayna Baszler, or Io Sky against Zoe Stark. And sure, against Sonya Deville while we're at it. Keeping in mind that Kairi Sane's right there. Asuka's out with injury, and we'll see what happens as well with the 4th member of the group, who is. How do I forget the name Dakota Kai? I don't understand, because Dakota Kai, her heel turn back in NXT back in the day at War Games, one of the most brutal heel turns in the history of wrestling. Absolutely, and kind of out of nowhere, and it was something, and shows that Dakota Kai, I think, works better as a heel, so we'll see how she works as a sympathetic babyface when she comes back from injury, but it does feel like it's a legitimate injury that they used to write her off TV. And then the show ends with Orton defeating Ludwig Kaiser. They're clearly trying to build up Kaiser as a threat, as an upper mid Carter. We'll see how that continues to go for them. But of course, Randy Orton has to get the win going into his world title match with Gunther, where I would imagine he puts Gunther over on the 31st of August at Bash in Berlin. So there you go. Honestly, I do find this easier to watch. I do find this flows a little better than what you get with AEW. AEW feels like every match is a complete shift in the program, and WWE, it feels like there's more flow. So it really is a matter of just somebody sitting down and coming out with a good way to put it is like a book reads really, really well when you're reading it from one chapter into the next. And sometimes with AEW, there's a good book there, but the chapters are kind of in the wrong order. And I think that's part of what it's been with AEW. Like, there's nothing awful with AEW's show this week, although the Tony Storm Saraya match, objectively not great. But it's just, it feels like things aren't clicking on a level where AEW has the momentum. So they're still talking about the new TV deal. The last time I talked about the TV deal, somebody in the comments was, they've already got a new deal with Warner Brothers Discovery. It just hasn't been announced yet. Last I checked, it still hasn't been announced. So that feels odd because apparently there's all this enthusiasm from Warner Brothers Discovery for the product. But there's some debate about how much enthusiasm there is and what the next TV deal is going to include and how much money it's going to make for the company. If AEW succeeds, it's better for wrestlers. It's better for everybody. It's better for the jobs in the industry. But they have to get things on track. Even though TV ratings aren't worth what they used to be, the loss of ratings over the last couple of years is alarming. And no matter what your deal is with Warner Brothers Discovery, no matter what happens there, you don't want to see the ratings continue to fall and end up with less than, right now they're routinely, it seems, around 700,000 viewers. It doesn't feel like it's that long ago we were talking about 1 million as being that watermark where, oh, they're above 1 million this week or they're below 1 million. And now 1 million, they have virtually no chance of getting to 1 million, I would think, by the end of 2024. But if they do it right and if they build these up right, and I'm talking about the matches, the stars, and do some kind of cross promotion, I think it can work. But you got to do it right, and I'm not sure that the people in charge there are necessarily capable. One thing that'll be interesting to see with All In, I haven't seen an update yet on Shane McMahon, but it feels like Shane McMahon coming in could pique some interest for people. But do you bring Shane McMahon in and have him basically do an Eric Bischoff where he's leading an NWO type group that's trying to destroy AEW? Do you have him come in as a new guy for the Elite and decide, you know what, we're going to try to take down AEW from within? I don't know. Let me know your thoughts on how would you bring in Shane McMahon if you were going to bring, and I wouldn't personally. I only say that because Shane McMahon's about the same age I am. And I would think that putting me in a ring and having me start a run with a company probably wouldn't work out very well. And the last time that Shane McMahon got into a ring, he got hurt. He got hurt in part, it's age. It's much easier to get hurt when you're older than when you're younger. Trust me on this one. I routinely have injuries that I'm thinking, how did this happen? I don't understand how I got bruised up. What the hell's going on? But anyways, there you go. Let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.